I have a confession to make. I am terrible at making intros, so I won't even try for this video. That being said, I would like to know whether you would prefer for my Iceberg videos to just start immediately, or if you like an intro, please let me know in the comments. With that over with, please enjoy the NES Godzilla Iceberg. A little note before we begin. Because this iceberg talks about many different types of media, I will color code the entries to clarify what media the entry comes from. Green text means the entry comes from the original 1988 game. Red text means the entry comes from the 2011 creepypasta. Yellow text means the entry comes from the 2015 replay creepypasta. And blue text covers all other miscellaneous media, like fan-made stories or fan games. Also, this iceberg was inspired by the iceberg made by Hubwub Sushi Games, and many entries on this iceberg come from their iceberg, so here's a special thanks for your inspiration. Godzilla, Monster of Monsters. Godzilla, Monster of Monsters is a video game developed by Compile and Toho for the NES in 1988. The gameplay consists of playing as Godzilla and Mothra traveling through 8 hexagonal grid levels in interplanetary space called ring fields and smashing everything in your way, while battling enemy monsters controlled by Planet X. It's really just your average NES beat-em-up action game, but with the Godzilla brand tacked on top for some extra sales. The game itself is pretty average in my opinion, not bad but not the best. If you're interested, I'd highly recommend playing the game for yourself to find out more. If you have an NES copy, that's a no-brainer, but if you don't have one, emulation is really your only option because this game has never been released on anything except the NES. NES Godzilla Creepypasta. The NES Godzilla Creepypasta is an incredibly long creepypasta written by CosbyDAF that is famous for its incredible length compared to most creepypastas, and also for the amazing art that came with it. Most creepypastas are short text-based stories, purely meant to frighten the reader and not much else. But it's safe to say the NES Godzilla Creepypasta takes the very concept of a creepypasta and turns it on its head. I'd even go so far as to say the story shouldn't even be considered a creepypasta, but rather a well-written horror story, because it's clear the writer put way more effort in it than anybody would ever expect for a story like it. It's about a man named Zack who gets a copy of Godzilla, Monster of Monsters to relive his childhood, but gets much more than what he bargained for, because after all, what you don't pay with money, you pay with your soul. The entire story is littered with detailed 8-bit images that describe almost perfectly what is written, which really makes the story feel just that more interesting and real, as if you were actually reading an account of someone playing an actual anomalous game. Not to mention the large amount of emphasis in the story on the non-horror aspects of it, like the fact that many of the kaiju from the Godzilla franchise make appearances here, which also makes the story feel like a Godzilla tribute and not just a horror story using his name. I actually cannot recommend enough that you all watching this video right now should go and read the story now or the commentary videos. I won't give any spoilers now, but when covering the later entries of this iceberg, I may spoil the story. So if you haven't read it yet, go read it now and watch this video after you finished. But here's just a quick reminder that if you are easily disturbed, you should not read the story. In all my praise of it, I still have to remind you that this still is a horror story, and you should treat it as such. If you've already read it, then we can continue on with this iceberg. If you'd rather listen to the story, then Goji73 has on his channel possibly the best reading available online, complete with a soundtrack. NES Godzilla Replay. Godzilla Replay is the official sequel to the NES Godzilla Creepypasta, also written by CosbyDAF. The story picks up after the last story, in which the anomalous game cartridge changes hands to a new protagonist, Carl, who tries the game for himself only to find the game has changed itself entirely since the last time it was played, in much stranger ways than either he or Zack could have ever expected. The story is actually still unfinished, and is currently sitting at 5 chapters and 2 sub-chapters. The author went on hiatus after finishing the first 5 chapters, and only just released part 1 of chapter 6 2 years ago as of writing. So if he releases the other chapters in the future, this iceberg may become obsolete. If that happens, I may make an update video covering what could be in the next few chapters. Godzilla Replay is still a creepypasta, but unlike its predecessor, it focuses much more on the non-horror aspects of the world. For example, in a part of the story where Carl has to help the oppressed inhabitants of one of the worlds he visits. The story also contains a lot of world building and lore connecting to the previous story, which is exactly why the release of the next few chapters is so anticipated, as it might bring the story full circle and reveal the truth about this cartridge. As of writing, all information about replay in this Iceberg is taken from the latest version, and may become obsolete as the other chapters release. Again, I'd highly recommend you read the story first before watching this video, because there will be spoilers. If you go into this expecting the same experience as reading the original pasta, you might be in for a surprise. Boss monsters. Godzilla Monster of Monsters has 8 different boss monsters you can fight, which are kind of like the monsters you control in that they can move on the ring field, in a turn-based system like chess pieces. It is not mandatory to fight the monsters except the final boss, but it's very hard to avoid fighting them because they will actively try to fight you. The battle gameplay is only comparable to a low-quality Street Fighter but with Godzilla, and you are given about 40 seconds to fight and defeat the monster before the game kicks you out. Every world in the game introduces a new monster to fight, and the last world, Planet X, is basically a boss rush world. The 8 monsters you can fight in the game are Godzilla, Mogira, Varan, Hedorah, Baragon, Gigan, Mechagodzilla, and Ghidorah, the final boss. What's interesting about this ensemble of monsters is that this game is actually the first time most of these monsters have been together, and some of these monsters weren't even Godzilla series kaiju until this game, most notably Godzilla, Mogira, Varan, and Baragon. Godzilla has never appeared in a Godzilla film, and Mogira didn't appear in the Godzilla film until 1994. Varan has his own film, but just barely cameoed in Destroy All Monsters, and Baragon also just appeared in that film. I'm not really sure why the game's developers decided to include more obscure Toho monsters instead of more well-known ones, but it's still cool that these little-known kaiju at least got some exposure for this game. Subspace stages. Subspace stages are what you could call the mini-boss stages of Godzilla NES. While most stages in the game are long hallways filled with enemies and structures to destroy, subspace stages are very short stages where the main focus is fighting enemies. They usually appear as short filler stages when playing a regular level, but you can also play them by selecting this blue vortex. There are 3 subspace stages in the game, and in classic Godzilla NES fashion, they all feature obscure Toho property. The first subspace stage is a short hallway filled with alien Dagora cells, which drop a lot of capsules, making the stage a good place to refill your life. Dagora is yet another obscure Toho kaiju that didn't appear with Godzilla until this game. And what's interesting is that while in the actual game only small Dagora cells appear, in the fan-made creepypasta game, the final version of Dagora, an alien squid, appears as a mini-boss. The second subspace stage is the Matongo stage, another short hallway that at the end contains a Matongo hive, which will continuously spawn small Matongo, and the later levels, Inferno Craft, until it is destroyed. The last subspace stage is a battle with the battleship Goten, which will put up one hell of a fight unless you destroy the bridge. Ghidorah password. While the password menu is mostly used for saving your game like most NES passwords, it also functions as a cheat menu, where entering certain words can bring up hidden secrets in the game. One such password is the Ghidorah password, which if entered brings up an unfinished world with some very strange music playing in the background. Because Godzilla is stuck and cannot move, the level is unplayable, and so the only way to exit this world is to reset the game. It's still unknown what this world could be exactly, but it's speculated it could be either some kind of debug world or an Easter egg. It is most likely an Easter egg or some kind of developer inside joke, due to the fact that the developers took the effort to compose custom music for this unused world. Japanese versus international version differences. The title screen most familiar with players of Godzilla NES is this one with the Godzilla adjusting his own title, but this screen only appears in the international release. In Japan, you get this arguably cooler portrait of Godzilla, Also noteworthy is the fact that the Japanese title screen uses the iconic Godzilla theme, while the international screen uses the theme for Planet X. In the beginning cutscene, the international version uses the Mars theme, while the Japanese version has, again, custom music. For some strange reason, the player monsters can only move half the spaces in a turn in the Japanese version as they can in the international version. There are actually several more differences between the international versions of this game. First is that the monsters are named differently. For example, Mogira is labeled as Mogala, and Ghidorah is labeled as King Ghidra. Another difference is the boards. A few boards have differences in layout. Most of the differences are negligible, usually only differing by one space added or a monster moved here and there, but the most drastic change is in Neptune, which doubles the size of the board in the Japanese version, adding one jungle space. This makes Neptune very tedious to play through, so I'm glad that was changed. All maps that have Ghidorah do not make him visible from the start in Japan. The scoring system only exists in the international version. Ghidorah is slightly stronger on Earth in Japan. The planet title cards only exist in the international version. The password screen uses a different font and red numbers in Japan. Ghidorah and Mogira glitch. The first two bosses in the game, Ghidorah and Mogira, both glitch in battle. Ghidorah has this extremely annoying glitch where he backs you into a corner and traps you with his tentacles. It can stall you for a long time, even running out the timer in some cases. This glitch is only notable because in the creepypasta the glitch appears twice to a creepy effect when combined with the red glitch. Mogira also glitches in battle, but this glitch is significantly more helpful than the previous glitch. Constantly using the tail whip on Mogira will basically freeze him in the corner for you to easily defeat him. Planets in the sky. While the worlds in the game are named after the planets, the game does not take place on the actual planets, instead taking place on floating areas in space called ring fields, where all the levels and bosses are. This is confirmed by the manual and by the fact that you can see the planets in the sky during gameplay. NGC game differs from original pasta. A few years after the original creepypasta released, a fan game based on it was started. The game is still in beta to this day and only features Earth, Mars, and Paphos as of writing. What's very interesting about this game is while it still loosely follows the main creepypasta, it goes above and beyond and includes a lot of new content never seen before in either the main game or the creepypasta. Examples include the ability to play as several other monsters, as well as added levels, enemies, and lore. However, the decision to include all this new content has hampered the development speed, considering the team working on this game is very small, and the game still only has 3 worlds after years of development. It hasn't been cancelled, but an extremely long waiting time is expected for a full release. For this version, another creepypasta game, supervised by CosbyDAF, is currently in development. Destroy all monsters cheat. This is probably my favorite of all the cheat codes. Entering the phrase, destroy all monsters, will start the game on Earth, with your monsters at level 8 and all of the game's bosses on the board at the same level as they are on Planet X. This could be considered a special boss rush challenge, and I used to play this mode a lot when I didn't have the patience to get to Planet X. This cheat code could be inspired by the Godzilla movie Destroy All Monsters, where the plot basically mirrors the story of the game and also features Godzilla and a large cast of monsters. The symbolism of Replay's worlds and bosses. The symbolism of Replay is very different from the first creepypasta, in that all 7 worlds of the creepypasta have very clear symbolism regarding the 7 biblical deadly sins. Each world stands for one sin, and the levels, enemies, bosses, and other aspects are all themed around the sin the world stands for. Gelid, the first world, stands for sloth, and as such, features themes of extreme cold and lethargy. Corona, the second world, stands for pride, and the theming is a little less consistent, featuring chess, power plants, and narcissists, but still kinda fits. In Amorphous, everything is literally green with envy, and the jealous denizens of this world drown their own kind in the deep waters under their ruined cities. Tempest stands for lust, and the torn landscape is battered by heavy winds and too many holes to count. Alkali stands for greed, and while we're at it, why not throw class division and social commentary galore in the mix? That still leaves two worlds open for the sins of gluttony and wrath, and it'll be interesting to see how these go. The Sin Gate. Speaking of sins, an interesting plot point in this creepypasta is the Sin Gate. At the end of every world, Carl defeats a sin boss, which drops a sin icon upon defeat. The sin icon is then moved to a Sin Gate, which contains 7 slots for each of the sins, and will supposedly open upon the completion of all 7 worlds, which essentially turns this game into a macabre version of Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. There's tons of speculation about what could be behind this gate. Theories range from Red being behind the gate to it being some kind of final world with Warlock like Zenith. However, none of these can be proven for sure until the story concludes. The Transcendence Project. Unlike the Sin Gate, which literally opens the door to speculation, the Transcendence Project blows it wide open and completely changes the story as we know it. In a way, this project is a massive lore reveal explaining how exactly this anomalous cartridge works. There will be spoilers, so skip ahead if you don't want those. Basically, in August of 1997, a researcher by the name of Robert Lawrence received the anomalous game cartridge via anonymous donation, and after determining it was some kind of transcendence, conducted various experiments on it and managed to gather significant information about it. Namely, he discovered a few rules for how the transcendence works. I'll summarize them here. Rule 1. The game can establish some kind of metaphysical connection with the player over time as the player plays the game. At first, the game will function normally in the first world or two, but with a few minor differences. This state is used by the game to hook up to the player's mind and learn about them, so it can create a gateway to another world or dimension, synchronized with the player's mind, of course. This gateway will manifest as new content in the game. There are a few exceptions where the game changes immediately if the player is already expecting the game to be anomalous. Rule 2. There is seemingly no limit to the connection the game can have with the player. It is fully capable of accessing any memory the player has and will personalize the game based on those memories. The game is also fully capable of hearing anything the player says and will respond in real time without any clear physical voice input. The connection at later stages even goes so far as manipulating the player's feelings, and in severe cases has been known to inflict actual physical, unexplainable medical conditions such as seizures and paralysis. Rule 3. As the game is still a Godzilla game, the anomaly still has to include Godzilla elements. It can draw from the large number of Godzilla kaiju created over the years, and this seems to be the only constant of content between anomalous worlds. Rule 4. The game requires a human mind to form a connection. The game will function normally if any other form of life is present. Rule 5. The game can only form a connection with a singular human. Anomalies will not occur if the game detects more than one person is playing the game or even observing it. Complete isolation is required or else the anomaly will abruptly end. The player can, however, record their experiences or tell others without the game knowing. Rule 6. The anomaly will only last for one playthrough. If the player gets a game over or otherwise somehow erases their progress, the game will function normally with that user on every subsequent playthrough. Rule 7. The game compels all those who play it to subscribe to the Ross MC channel. Just kidding, but every bit of support would be greatly appreciated. I'm trying to hit 1K before the summer is over and most of my audience isn't subscribed, so... These principles were gathered from a long series of experiments Lawrence conducted on various test subjects. Gathering the results, Lawrence classified his studies as the Transcendence Project, and was determined to discover the secrets of this game, even hacking his journal into the game itself. The experiments lasted for 1.5 months, before the events began to take a turn for the stranger. On September 17th, one of the test subjects experienced a seizure while playing, claiming the anomalies in the game are demonic in nature before leaving the project. On September 21st, most of the test subjects stopped playing, and the remaining 3 develops anxiety and fear over the game, which seem to only amplify the strange effects of the game. Lawrence himself expressed concerns that malignant entities could be within the game. None of his test subjects completed the game before the Transcendence project abruptly ended the following day, as September 21st, 1997 is the final entry in the journal. Nobody knows what happened to the project or the game after this point, only that the game somehow ended up in Billy's and then Zach's hands more than a decade later. Theories have ranged from the researcher forgetting to input later entries to the project being covered up in some sort of conspiracy. Personally, I believe that whatever institution Lawrence worked with determined the project was simply a strange and eccentric use of the resources, and simply fired him and or cut funding for his project. There really isn't any way of knowing for sure though. Replay strange passwords. The Transcendence project isn't the only strange thing to come out of Carl's messing with the password screen. 5 distinct results came out of the password menu, all of them equally bizarre. The first result is the sound test menu, which is pretty similar to how it works in the real game. The Destroy All Monsters password results in a minigame where the objective really is to destroy all monsters. The other 3 passwords were actually completely random entries with the strange language option, consisting of 3 minigames: a blood sample game, a strange rowing game with a whale skull, and a bicycle minigame. Personally, I believe that since these came from completely random entries, there could theoretically be a near infinite amount of these strange mini-games in the game. There isn't really much purpose behind these plot-wise, and if I were to guess, I'd say it's some kind of random, uncontrolled manifestation of the cartridge's abilities. In other words, this is Replay's equivalent of the TV screens. Secret Varen Fight. In Paphos, if you complete this specific level, it's actually possible to find Varen in the gravity base. If you manage to defeat him, he can actually become a playable monster. Not much else beyond that. Blue Jungle. In Paphos, Zack actually mentions a tile with part of the jungle icon on it, but doesn't clarify further and never plays the level. This is quite not detailed considering Zack went out of his way to play every other level in the game. In the game, this level is reinterpreted as a cave taken over by a fungal growth known as the Blight, which behaves not unlike the Cordyceps from The Last of Us. The level contains a massive fungal abomination at the end as a kind of mini-boss. Moon Beast's missing attack description. The NES Godzilla creepypasta is infamous for painstakingly explaining every little detail of every level and enemy featured in this haunted game, but for some strange reason, Zack talks very little about the Moon Beast, the mini-boss encountered halfway through Entropy. He only takes one screen cap, and he claims the reason he didn't take more is because he was completely focused on beating the Moon Beast. This, however, is no excuse for his lack of description. Even if he couldn't take screen caps, he could at least write down what it was like to fight it, unless he somehow completely forgot, which could be understandable considering what happened immediately afterwards. Missing Extus music description. The attention to detail present in the story extends to music descriptions, where Zack tries his best to describe the music of the game. However, in Extus, Zack just doesn't describe the board music for whatever reason. Personally, I think this is just a writing oversight by Cosbydaff, who could have easily forgotten such a superficial detail.